Chapter 3 Taste of Poison. A gentle knock pulled Mara from the half-sleep she'd fallen into, not the aggressive rap of delivery drivers, or the authoritative bang of police. This was careful apologetic, like the person on the other side was afraid the door itself might reject them. Only one person knocked like that. Mara groaned softly, every muscle protesting as she shifted on her parents' couch. The burns along her ribs pulled tight. With each movement, the honey and gauze doing their job but not eliminating the pain, just making it manageable, background noise instead of a scream. She shuffled to the door, each step a reminder that she fought something that should have killed her. Her body felt heavy, like gravity had increased overnight, like she was carrying extra weight that had nothing to do with physical mass. When she opened the door, Yana stood there holding a takeout bag that smelled like sweet and sour chicken, steam rising from the top. The scent of ginger and rice and that particular sweetness that came from too much sugar in cornstalk, Mara's favorite, had been her favorite for years, long before everything fell apart. Of course, Liana remembered. Liana looked different in daylight, still beautiful, that hadn't changed, probably never would, but tired, dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, hair pulled back in a messy bun that suggested she'd been up all night, clothes that looked slept in, wrinkled at the edges. She clutched the bag like it was a shield, knuckles white against the paper. Mara's jaw tightened. Don't think take out some magic whole pass for ditching me for a year. The words came out sharper than she intended, but maybe that was exactly as sharp as she meant them. A year, 12 months of silence, 365 days of wondering if she'd done something wrong, if she could have said something different, if she was somehow fundamentally unlovable. Still, she took the food and left the door open. An invitation. Or maybe just acceptance of the inevitable. Either way, Yana stepped inside carefully, closing the door behind her with a soft click that sounded too loud in the quiet house. "Your parents?" Liana asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Work." Mara moved toward the kitchen, setting the bag on the counter. The normalcy had felt surreal, like they were play-acting at being normal, pretending the past year hadn't happened. "Mom's pulling a double. Dad will be back until late. And you're supposed to be resting." "Yeah. Well," Mara started unpacking the food, avoiding eye contact. "Turns out almost dying doesn't come with paid time off." The joke fell flat. Liana didn't laugh. Mara hadn't expected her to. They stood in the kitchen for a moment, the space between them feeling like miles instead of feet. The familiar layout of Mara's childhood home suddenly felt like foreign territory. The refrigerator's hum was too loud. The clock ticked too insistent, everything amplified by the tension crackling in the air. "We should go to your place," Liana said finally. "If you're up for the walk, give you some privacy from—" She gestured vaguely. "All this." Mara considered arguing, considered saying she was fine right here, that Liana could leave if she was so concerned about privacy, but the truth was, she didn't want to explain to her parents why her ex was suddenly back, didn't want to field the questions, see the concern in her father's eyes, hear her mother's careful attempt at neutrality that would barely mask her protectiveness. "Fine," Mara said. "Let me grab my stuff." The walk to Mara's apartment was only a few blocks, but it felt longer. Every step reminded her that her body wasn't fully healed, that moving hurt in ways she was trying to ignore. The burns pulled at her skin, her muscles ached from fighting the snake, but she forced herself to keep pace with Liana, refusing to show weakness, even though limping would have been perfectly reasonable. The city had changed since the portals opened. Or maybe Mara was just seeing it differently now. Before, she walked these streets without thinking twice. Now everything felt hostile, dangerous, like the city itself had turned feral. Graffiti covered more walls than she remembered, some of it artistic, beautiful, even elaborate murals of transformation, of people caught mid-change between human and something else. Messages of hope, we are more, evolution is survival, but most of it was angry, hateful, awakened scum spray painted over a closed storefront, purity or death on a bus stop bench where someone had burned the word death deeper, scarred it into the metal. Evolution is here competing with God will cleanse in layers of paint that told the story of a city at war with itself. Shop windows were boarded up, some with notices explaining they'd been looted, others just had the boards, no explanation necessary. A few brave businesses stayed open with signs no awakened or conversely all welcome here, picking sides, drawing lines, making it impossible to stay neutral. Fewer people on the streets than there used to be. The lunch crowd that would have filled these sidewalks before had vanished. Those who were out moved quickly, heads down, hands in pockets or visibly holding weapons, knives, bats. One woman had what looked like a cattle prod. No one made eye contact. No one lingered. The social contract that kept cities functioning had dissolved. Everyone was a potential threat now, everyone suspicious. The social fabric had frayed, and everyone could feel it pulling apart thread by thread. Soon there'd be nothing left but isolated individuals, tribes, factions. The city fragmenting into territories controlled by whoever had the most power or the most fear. Mara had texted her parents that she was crashing at a friend's place, better than explaining why Liana was back, better than trying to put into words something she didn't understand herself. They walked in silence, the take-out bag swinging between them like a pendulum marking time. Liana kept glancing at her quick, furtive looks that Mara pretended not to notice, assessing, worried, guilty. Good, let her worry, let her feel guilty. A year of radio silence earned them much at least. Mara's apartment was exactly as she'd left it before the hospital. Small, cramped, barely affordable even with her parents helping with rent. The studio layout meant everything was visible at once: bed against one wall, kitchenette against another, tiny bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. But it was hers. The first place she had entirely to herself after Liana left. She thought having her own space would help, would make the absence less noticeable. Instead, it just made the emptiness more obvious. All that space, and no one to share it with. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the ancient heater and the buzz of the city beyond the blinds. Evening light filtered through, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. Mara set the bag on the small kitchen table, really just a folding table with two mismatched chairs, and started unpacking. They sat across from each other, the surface between them feeling like a negotiation table. DMZ, no man's land. For a while, only the sound of chopsticks and breathing filled the room. Mara focused on her food, using it as an excuse not to talk. The chicken was good, perfectly crispy on the outside, tender inside, sauce exactly the right balance of sweet and sour. It tasted like memory, like better times. She hated that it tasted good. Liana took a bite, eyes flicking up. "You can't even look at me," Mara sighed, setting her fork down. The metal clinked against the plate, too loud. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." The words were gentle but insistent, not demanding exactly, but refusing to accept dismissal. Liana had always been like that, persistent in the quietest ways, asking questions until you either answered or explicitly told her to stop, usually both. Mara stared down at the food, gathering her thoughts. Words felt insufficient, like trying to describe color to someone who'd never seen. But she had to try, had to make Liana understand that everything had changed. "I'm not the same, Liana." Her voice came out rough and low, scraped raw from the inside out. "Something in me changed that night. I can still hear that snake the hiss, the way it moved. It's like it's stuck inside my head. Not a memory, not just trauma. Asterisk inside dot asterisk." She paused, fingers tightening around her chopsticks until the wood creaked. "I survived, sure, but if I focus hard enough now, I can make my hearing sharper, or my sight shifts almost like heat vision, where I can see temperature gradients. I can feel vibrations in the ground, sense movement through walls, but I can only focus on one thing at a time, or it's total sensory overload. Everything screaming at once, too much information, and my brain just..." She made a gesture like an explosion. "It only lasts a few seconds before I have to let go or pass out." Liana tilted her head slightly, curiosity softening the worry in her expression. "That's probably because your mana pool's small." Mara blinked, the words not quite processing. "My what?" "Mana," Liana said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Energy. The force that powers abilities. Everyone who's awakened has a pool of energy they draw from. Yours is small because it's new, untrained. You've got to build it up over time like a muscle. The more you use it, the more it grows. But you have to be careful not to overtax it." She set her chopsticks down, leaning forward slightly. "Tai Chi's good for that, helps balance the flow, teaches you to move energy through your body without forcing it. There's even snake-style forms that might resonate with what you've got. You could probably find it online, videos and tutorials." She paused, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "But you'll have to adapt it. Find a form that fits your power specifically. Let your mana move through it naturally instead of fighting against your instincts." Mara stared at her, thought paused midair. The casualness of it threw her. Liana was talking about supernatural energy like it was exercise routines, transformation like it was perfectly normal. "You're talking like you've done this before." Liana nodded, setting her food down with careful precision. "Since I was little, my family has a tradition. We've been training for generations. When the world started changing 5 years ago, when people started awakening, they decided I needed to focus on proper training." She raised a hand, and for a brief second, The color of her hair shimmered a ripple from black to soft amber, then back again like water reflecting different light. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Reality bent into her will with barely any effort. Mara's breath caught. She'd seen Liana's powers before, of course. Had watched her shift features, alter bone structure, change her appearance like trying on clothes. But never this casually, never with this level of control. Oh, that's what I wouldn't understand. Your family's some kind of secret power clan? No, Liana said softly, urgency creeping into her voice. That's not it. Then what? Mara's voice rose, sharp and raw, all the anger and hurt of the past year bubbling up at once. Because I could have handled that, Liana. You think I'd have judged you for having powers? For having a family with abilities? I would have thought it was amazing. I would have been proud of you, fascinated by it. But what I don't understand, what I can't forgive, is why you had to completely abandon me to do it. The silence that followed was heavy, pressing against the walls like a physical thing, like the air pressure had dropped, making everything feel thick and hard to breathe. Liana didn't look away this time, held Mara's gaze with something like resignation. Because if I'd stayed, I would have dragged you into it, and I didn't want that for you. Into what exactly? The clan politics, the expectations, the wars that have been going on for thousands of years that normal people don't even know exist. Liana's voice stayed level, but her hands trembled slightly. My family, we're one of the great clans. We have enemies, we have responsibilities, and anyone close to me becomes a target. Mara's jaw clenched. Too late for that. Yay. Liana exhaled softly, shoulders sagging under invisible weight. You're right. I fucked up. I shouldn't have left like that. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. I thought I was protecting you. Turns out I was just being a coward. The admission hung between them. Mara wanted to grab it, hold it up as proof of everything she felt for the past year. But another part of her, the part that had missed Liana every single day, wanted to let it go. Wanted to accept the apology and move forward. She wasn't sure which impulse would win. Mara's eyes narrowed. Then why are you here now? What changed? You almost died, Liana said simply. And I realized that trying to protect you by staying away was stupid. You're in it now whether I'm here or not. The world's changing. Portals are opening. Beasts are killing people. And you, she gestured at Mara. You're awakened now. Whether you wanted it or not, you're part of this. I didn't ask for this. No one does. Liana's smile was bitter. But here we are. So let me help you. Please. I can't take back the past year, but I can help you survive what's coming. Mara stared at her for a long moment, weighing options. Pride said to tell her to leave. Pragmatism said she needed help, and underneath both, a treacherous part of her heart said she missed Liana so much that it physically hurt. Fine, she said finally. Teach me. But that doesn't mean we're... She gestured vaguely between them. This doesn't fix us. I know, Liana said quietly. I'm not asking it to. They finished eating in silence, but it felt different now. Less hostile. More like a truce and a ceasefire. After they finished, Liana pushed her plate aside and fixed Mara with an assessing look. Show me. Try to tap into it. Your mana, your power. Let me see what you're working with. Mara set her fork down, suddenly nervous. It was one thing to stumble through this alone, another to have someone watching, judging, evaluating. But Liana was right, she needed help, needed guidance before she hurt herself or someone else. She closed her eyes, focusing on the quiet hum in her chest, that constant vibration that had been there since she woke up in the hospital. Since she'd held that crystal, it felt like a second heartbeat, slightly out of sync with her actual pulse, a rhythm that didn't quite match. She drew a slow breath, feeling the buzz beneath her in that raw, untamed energy that had flared in the alley. She could feel it moving through her, pulling in her center, waiting to be directed. She flexed her fingers, imagining the pulse as a thread she could tug. Just one. Just hearing. The moment she tried, the world expanded. Every scrape of the city outside became a symphony of chaos. Car engines rumbling blocks away. Conversations through walls. Words distinct and overlapping. The hum of traffic merging with sirens and music. And the rustle of wind through urban canyons. Every vibration of the radiator under her feet felt like thunder. A neighbor's TV, someone's dog barking, a door slamming, footsteps on stairs, laughter, crying, fighting, living, all of it screaming into her consciousness at once. Her chest tightened, her stomach lurched, her vision blurred at the edges as her brain tried to process too much information through one overwhelmed sense. She had to release it, had to let go before her skull split open from the pressure. She gasped, the sound harsh in the sudden relative quiet, and slumped in her chair. Okay, Liana said quietly, voice cutting through the residual buzz in Mara's ears. That's what happens when you try to take in too much. Your mind can't filter it all, so it becomes noise instead of information. I'll try again, but this time smaller. One specific thing. Not all sound. One sound. Mara closed her eyes again, gripping the edges of the chair hard enough that her knuckles were white. She focused on the memory of the ice hiss, the snake sliding over wet concrete, that specific sound, at particular frequency. She isolated it in her mind, created a mental filter that blocked everything else. A heartbeat later she could hear it again, just that, nothing else. Just that sharp, coiled tension, the wet slide of scales on pavement, the deliberate, patient sound of a predator moving through its territory. A bead of sweat ran down her temple, her fingers twitched from the effort of maintaining control, keeping the filter in place while her power tried to expand naturally. But she held it, just a second, just long enough to prove she could. Then she exhaled, letting the pulse fade. Her knees wobbled slightly as the power released. Her chest burned with exertion, but she opened her eyes, meeting Liana's gaze. "See," Liana said, nodding with something like pride in her expression. "That's it. One pulse. You held it. For a second, yes, but you held it. That's the first step." Mara sagged in the chair, feeling raw and drained, like she'd run a marathon. "1 second. That's all I get. For now," Liana said gently. "Your mana pool is small. Think of it like a cup right now. You've got maybe a shot glass worth of energy. Every time you use your power, you're pouring that energy out. When it's gone, you're empty until it refills. But every time you do this, the cup gets a little bigger. Your capacity grows. Eventually, you'll have a bucket, then a barrel, but it takes time and practice." Mara exhaled again, letting the chair cradle her exhausted body. The hiss from the alley echoed faintly in her mind, enough loud, not real, but enough to remind her it was there, always there, waiting. So if I push too far, it's sensory overload. "Yes," Liana confirmed. "That's your body telling you slow down, focus, one thread at a time. If you ignore that warning and keep pushing, you'll pass out. Push even harder, and you could do permanent damage. Burn out your own nervous system. I've seen it happen to people who try to force their way to power too fast." The warning hung heavy. Mara had already come close to dying once this week. She wasn't eager to repeat the experience through her own stupidity. Liana slid a glass of water across the table. "Food, water, rest. That's how you refill the pool. And small, controlled practice, little bits at a time until it becomes second nature." Mara took the water gratefully, draining half the glass in one long swallow. The cold liquid helped ground her, brought her back into her body. She realized she was shaking less than before, a little steadier. Progress, maybe, or just exhaustion making her too tired to tremble. The apartment stayed quiet except for the scrape of Mara's chair as she shifted and the slow rhythm of her pulse gradually returning to normal. Liana glanced up at her, expression soft but steady. "You're going to be okay. Not just alive okay. In control, powerful, if you want to be, but you have to be patient with yourself." Mara swallowed, still tasting that bitter metallic tang that came with overusing her power, but she nodded, because what else could she do? This was her life now, might as well learn to live it. They spent the next hour practicing, small pulses, controlled releases. Mara tried hearing, then sight, then that strange vibration sense that let her feel movement through solid surfaces. Each one lasted only seconds before exhaustion forced her to stop, but each time was slightly better, slightly more controlled, the filter in her mind becoming more refined with practice. By the time the sun started to set, painting the apartment in shades of orange and purple, Mara felt wrung out but oddly satisfied, like she'd accomplished something tangible, made progress instead of just surviving. Liana stood and moved behind the couch where Mara had collapsed. "Too tired to sit upright anymore. Let me see the burns," she said quietly. Mara hesitated, suddenly self-conscious. The intimacy of it felt dangerous, but she was too exhausted to maintain walls, and the burns did need attention. She pulled off her hoodie with careful movements, revealing the bandages wrapped around her ribs and shoulders. Some of them had started to peel at the edges, adhesive loosey its grip to sweat and movement. Liana's fingers were gentle as she peeled them back, revealing blistered skin underneath. Red, angry, weeping slightly at the edges. Not as bad as they could be, but still painful. Still visible proof of how close Mara had come to not making it. "You need to keep these clean," Liana murmured, voice taking on a clinical tone. Professional, detached, easier than acknowledging the intimacy of touching Mara's bare skin. "Honey helps. The antibacterial properties are actually pretty effective. Do you have any?" Mara nodded toward the kitchen, not trusting her voice. Cabinet above the sink. Liana retrieved the jar of local honey, the kind Mara's mother insisted was better than anything from the store, along with fresh gauze from Mara's first aid kit. She knelt beside the couch, movements practiced and sure, like she'd done this before, probably had if her clan training was as intense as she'd implied. This is going to sting a little, Liana warned. Mara grunted as the honey spread across her skin, cool at first from the glass jar, then warming as it made contact with inflamed tissue. The sting was sharp but brief, fading to a dull ache that was almost pleasant compared to the constant throb she'd been dealing with. Liana worked in silence, her touch steady and sure, fingers tracing the edges of burns carefully, avoiding the worst spots while ensuring even coverage. The honey glistened gold in the fading light, catching rays of sunset and turning Mara's injuries into something almost beautiful. When she finished with Mara's back, Mara shifted and leaned against her without thinking about it, pure instinct, seeking comfort, letting the weight of her upper body rest on Liana's chest, the warmth press against her spine, grounding her in a way nothing else had, making her feel less like a collection of injuries and more like a person. Mara reached forward and carefully removed the remaining bandages from her front, revealing more scrapes and bruises that painted her ribs in shades of purple and yellow. She picked up the honey jar, dabbing it gently over each tender spot. The sticky warmth spread slowly, sharp contrast to the cool air of the apartment. Liana's hands remained at Mara's sides, eyes following every movement with calm attentiveness. She didn't reach to help, didn't try to take over, just watched, a quiet presence that allowed Mara to take control of her own healing. It felt important somehow, like an acknowledgement that Mara was capable of caring for herself even when she was hurt, that accepting help didn't mean surrendering agency. When Mara finished, she let her hands fall to her lap, leaning back into Liana fully, the tension eased from her shoulders, not disappearing, exactly, but becoming manageable. The closeness remained a silent acknowledgement of trust, care, and the small, unspoken intimacy of being seen and tended to without judgment. Mara closed her eyes, sinking fully into the warmth behind her. Liana's steady presence grounded her like an anchor in rough seas. The soft rise and fall of her chest beneath Mara's back became a metronome for her ragged thoughts, slowing them down, making them manageable. The apartment was still, the hum of the heater, the faint buzz of the city outside. Nothing else existed in this moment. Mara opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the afternoon light streaming through the blinds. The rays caught dust motes, made them dance like tiny stars. She shifted slightly, turning her head. Their eyes met Liana's, soft, steady, calm in contrast to the storm still humming under Mara's skin. Before Mara could say anything, before she could think about whether this was a good idea, whether she was ready, whether forgiveness could be the simple, Liana leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle, at first tentative testing, a question more than a statement, asking permission, offering something precious and fragile. Mara's lips parted slightly in surprise, and then something inside her cracked open. All the walls she built over the past year, all the defenses and anger and hurt, they crumbled like they'd been made of sin all along. She leaned into it, and the world started to fall away. Liana's fingers traced along Mara's undamaged skin, light as breath, careful to avoid the burns and bruises. The touch sent electricity down Mara's spine, made her skin prickle with sensation that had nothing to do with powers or mana, just pure physical response, chemistry, connection. Warmth flooded through her like honey in her veins, sweet, thick, spreading from her core outward until her fingertips tingled with it. They melted together, two sheets intertwining, coiling around each other like vines seeking sun. The tears deepened, became something more urgent, more necessary, like breathing, like drinking water after a year in the desert. The sound of the city went silent. The memory of the past year, the fights, the silence, the emptiness that had followed Mara like a shadow vanished as if it had never happened. There was only this, only them, only the press of lips and the tangle of fingers and the warmth that made everything else irrelevant. Mara's heartbeat synced with Liana's. She could feel it not metaphorically, but actually feel the rhythm of Liana's pulse matching hers, two hearts beating in perfect unison, finding harmony after so long apart. Her breath, her warmth, everything else disappeared into the background, distant and unimportant. For one perfect moment, Mara was whole, not broken, not healing, just complete. Then, ***, the sound tore through the fog like shattering glass, sharp, cold, visceral, not in her ears but in her ***, echoing through her skull like someone had taken a knife to the inside of her brain. Mara's body tensed, every muscle going rigid at once. Her heartbeat spiked, rhythm breaking apart into chaos. The warmth vanished, replaced by ice crawling through her veins like infection spreading from her core outward. Her skin went cold and clammy, her vision tunneled. She broke the kiss hard, pulling back so fast Liana gasped and nearly fell. Mara, confusion and hurt mixed in Liana's expression. Hands still half raised, like she wanted to reach out but didn't dare. Mara's chest heaved, eyes wide, unfocused. The hiss coiled through her thoughts, louder now than it had ever been. Insistent, possessive, angry. Not a memory, not trauma, not her imagination. Asterisk inside, dot asterisk. Something inside her had woken up. Something that didn't like what had just happened. Something that felt almost jealous. The realization made her stomach turn. I think it's time for you to go, Mara said, voice flat and hollow, dead sounding, like all the warmth had been sucked out of her along with everything else. Liana blinked, confusion flooding her face. What, Mara, what just now? Mara stood on shaking legs, wrapping her arms around herself, turning away. She couldn't look at Liana's face, couldn't see the hurt there. Please, just go. Liana stayed frozen for a moment, hurt and confusion warring across her expression. Her hands trembled slightly, and the faint shimmer of her power rippled down her arms. Instinct, emotion breaking through her carefully maintained control. The air around her warped slightly, responding to her distress. But she didn't argue. She stood slowly, gathered her things with mechanical movements, and moved toward the door. At the threshold, she paused, glancing back. Mara, whatever that was, we can. Go, Mara whispered, still not looking at her, staring at the wall like it held answers. Like if she looked hard enough, she could find some explanation that made sense. The door clicked shut with a finality that echoed through the apartment. Mara stood alone, arms wrapped tight around herself like she could physically hold herself together, like if she squeezed hard enough maybe she could keep all the broken pieces from scattering across the floor. The taste of Liana still on her lips, sweet and warm, and everything she'd wanted, everything she dreamed about for a year, and underneath it, something else, something bitter and ancient and cold, that made her want to scrub her tongue raw. The hiss coiled through her mind like poison in her veins, and for the first time since waking up in that hospital, Mara wondered if surviving had been a victory or a curse. She walked to the window on unsteady legs, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The city spread out below, lights flickering on as evening deepened into night. Somewhere out there, portals were still opening, beasts were still killing people, the world was still ending in slow motion, one crisis at a time. And inside her something was changing, growing, becoming. She could feel it now, in the quiet. That presence that had hissed when she kissed Liana. It wasn't separate exactly, more like a part of herself she hadn't known existed. Like discovering you had a second brain, a second consciousness sharing your skull without asking permission. What are you? She whispered to the empty apartment, to herself, to the thing coiled in her chest. No answer, just that patient, watchful silence, the kind of quiet that predators have when they're waiting for prey to make a mistake. Mara closed her eyes, exhaustion finally crashing over her like a wave. Her body hurt, her heart hurt, her mind hurt, everything hurt in ways she didn't have words for. But she was alive. She'd survived the snake, survived the poison, survived the hospital and Liana's return and the discovery that she was awakened now, that she was different, changed, part of a world she didn't understand and hadn't asked to join. In the growing darkness of her apartment, with only the city lights filtering through the blinds, she stood at the window and listened to the thing inside her settling back down, coiling, patient, content now that it had made its presence known, had drawn a line asterisk. This body is mine, this life is mine, and I will not share it but asterisk. The thought should have terrified her, should have sent her running back to the hospital demanding they cut out whatever had taken root inside her. But exhaustion made everything distant, abstract, problems for tomorrow Mara to deal with. Tonight Mara just wanted to sleep and forget and pretend for a few hours that everything was normal. She stumbled to the bed without bothering to change or brush her teeth, collapsed onto the mattress still half-dressed, burns protesting every movement. The honey on her skin had dried sticky and uncomfortable, but she was too tired to care. As consciousness slipped away, one final thought surfaced. Asterisk, Liana was right. I need help. I can't do this alone. Asterisk. But who could she turn to? Who could possibly understand what was happening to her when she didn't understand it herself? In her dreams, she moved through green light and coiling darkness, and something ancient whispered secrets in a language she shouldn't understand but somehow did, waiting for something she didn't understand and wasn't sure she wanted to know.